out now. You can just hang up. We'd just like to acknowledge as well our partners on this series. So we've got Royal Life Saving Society Australia, Commercial Aquatics Australia, OTM Planning Group, YMCA Victoria, Victoria State Government Health and Human Services Department, Belgravia Leisure, Cleaning Melbourne, VACA Services. Am I still in the meeting? Christie, can you hear me? I've just got a notification to say that I've been dropped out.
I know I can hear you. There was just about 2-second gap there where I just missed something you said, but I can hear you now.
Okay, I'm back. I'm not sure what happened there, everyone. Apologies. Looks like I'm back. We haven't had too many issues with this so far. Anyways, so today's session is on managing risks with regard specifically to social media. And we've got Christie Boucher, who's the Risk Services Manager at Guild Insurance. So a little bit about Christie is, so Christie has a degree in human movement and was initially a PE teacher, moved into training for corporate, into the sort of corporate world, specifically moved into risk management training and has been working as an educator in risk management with Guild Insurance for about 7 years. So we're quite lucky to have Christie as a resource for anyone that's dealt with insurers in the past. Normally, you sort of do your policy and then you don't really interact too much unless things are going really wrong. So Christie's role is really about helping organizations, whether you are a PT or a gym or a big aquatic facility, in understanding and minimizing risk, so that you don't have to end up in that sort of position where you're having to go through insurance claims and things like that. So it's about trying to reduce your exposure in the first place, which is obviously an integral part of risk management. So very lucky to have Christie as a resource. And I'll just give you a bit of an idea of what's coming as well. So next Friday we have Chantal Broderick, who's the Fitness Business Podcast owner and board member for Fitness Australia, talking about productivity habits. The following Friday, we have Fiona Crieris back from YMCA Victoria, talking about supporting mental health and wellness. Fiona presented at Philex last week and has presented at our summit in the past. And then Hannah Batista as well from YMCA Victoria, talking about customer-focused innovation and that customer journey. So I might hand over to you, Christie, if that's okay, and we'll get your presentation up and running. Thanks for joining us today, and I'm sure everyone's going to really enjoy this presentation.
Okay, are my slides up there now?
Yes, they are. Yeah.
Excellent, wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us today, everyone, and I'm quite excited to be here with you today, and always look forward to talking about social media risks. It's quite an interesting area of risk management and a continually growing area of risk management, I think, too, being, obviously we've had social media for quite a while now, but it's continually growing and changing in how much we're using it and how we actually use it, particularly at the moment now that a lot of us are using social media differently in our work because a lot of us aren't in our normal workplaces or working from home or other sort of remote sites. So it's a continually growing area of risk, which makes it particularly challenging too, because sometimes what we know now will change down the track. I did just want to stress, as was mentioned, I do work for an insurance company, and I appreciate what was said earlier, that we do really have this focus at Guild Insurance that we don't just want people insured with us to hear from us every time they sign up their policy and then maybe if they've got a claim. And that's exactly what my role is about, to give you some other resources, support, information outside of that policy and claim type period. So I guarantee this will not be an insurance plug at all. I actually don't work in the insurance side of things, in that I don't do insurance policies. I won't be able to talk about any of that information. I won't be able to answer any questions on that. This is purely just a risk management education session. As mentioned, I'm happy to follow if there's any questions popping up in the chat, although just to let you know, sometimes I do have trouble. It's not like a face-to-face session where I can see you if you've got your hand up and I can easily sort of stop talking and answer a question. Sometimes while I'm trying to look at my slides and look at the other screen where questions popping up, I apologise in advance if I do miss any. But on the final of my slides, as you were told, you can email the organisations who put this together for you as well. But at the end of my slides, I also have my email address at Guild Insurance. So if you do have any questions that I haven't got to, whether it be about the session, anything else about insurance, Guild Insurance, or anything else you think might be relevant, please do feel free to contact me after the session as well, if you'd like, and I'll try to get to those then. So moving along with the session. First off, what is social media? Now, it's become so widely used that most of us probably have some sort of understanding of what it is. Basically, it can be any type of online platform, websites, blogs. There's lots of different ways people use it, but it's basically just about communicating information in a range of different ways with individual people, large groups of people. It can be done in lots of different ways, but it's really quite broad. And I think that's one of the things that makes social media challenging now, is that there are so many social media platforms out there. I've been doing some risk management education around social media for a couple of years now. And whenever I go back and look at my slides and make some changes, I have to keep adding some icons to this first page. And I find for myself, I don't really know what half of them are or what half of them do. I'm not a huge social media user myself. I use a bit. I don't use every one of those platforms. And I think that's what makes it challenging for any of us. A lot of us who use social media won't use all the different platforms that are out there. But then working out what is best for you to use both personally and professionally, and understanding properly how they all work, is part of what makes this quite challenging for us. We're going to move on to different types of social media, and we're going to be talking about this quite a bit today. There's 3 different types of social media that exist out there in terms of how you actually use it. So the first use is business work objectives. So this is where you're engaging from a professional perspective, and you're trying to promote what it is your business does. So for a lot of you guys, it might be about promoting the centre in which you work. It might be talking about the programs that you'd be offering your members, people who come along and use your facilities. So it's really about kind of selling yourself, I guess, putting out there, this is who we are, this is what we offer as a business. The second one I've got there on the screen is still about the professional interaction, but it's about engagement with clients. So you're not just telling them, this is who we are, it's actually getting some sort of involvement with them. An example of this is maybe you might be running a competition where you want people to send in some information about what they're doing. At the moment, people are doing a lot of this sort of stuff. Send us some photos and maybe how you're exercising at home if you can't come to our facility. Send us pictures of your gym set up at the moment. That kind of stuff where you're getting some interaction back and forth between your business and your clients or your customers. So that's the engagement, where it's not just you talking out to them, but they're coming back to you. The third one we're going to be talking about is when your employees use their personal social media accounts for information and for sharing of information and content that has nothing to do with what they do at work. The key thing with all of this is that every single one of those types of uses can have an impact on your business, both positively and negatively. That includes how employees use their non-work related social media outside of work. That can impact the business as well. What I'm going to be doing next is showing you some examples of some poor uses of social media. Now, a couple of things to keep in mind. All of these that I've found are publicly available images that you can get. You can just find online from doing Google searches. Some of the examples that I'll show you, I found just through, maybe they've popped up in some news articles when people are talking about some things that have gone wrong. But also I've done a lot of Google searches for these images. So a couple of things to keep in mind. One, if you've done something really poor on social media, even if you don't think you got a particularly high profile, and some of these people don't, most of them don't actually, those sorts of images never go away, because as soon as someone takes a screenshot of something, it's there forever on Google Images. So things don't disappear when you've done something wrong. The other thing I want you to really keep in mind is I'm quite sure that when I talk to people about social media and talk about people doing the wrong thing on social media, I'm pretty certain that a lot of times people are thinking, come on, Christie, it's been around for a long time. We know not to do really stupid stuff on social media. If you don't believe how bad some people are on social media, please just go ahead and Google stupid stuff on social media. You'll have hours of entertainment, I guarantee you. Some of it is quite funny, but we also need to think about the serious impact from a business perspective. It is often quite surprising what people will do, both personally and professionally, when they just don't think and they get it really wrong. So when we go through these examples, I'd really encourage you to keep an open mind about what you do on social media, about what your colleagues might do on your business page, so those who might manage any sort of business account you have, but also keep an open mind to what any of your employees might be doing outside of work hours. I'm not suggesting they are doing the wrong thing, but you need to keep an open mind that maybe they are, and how could you better manage what's actually going on? Because I guarantee you, in some of the examples I'm about to show you, these people's bosses didn't think they were going to be writing those sorts of things on social media. So the first ones I'm going to show you are some business work objectives. So remember, this is where the company's trying to sell themselves and sell what they do. So the first two I'm showing you are really not, they're pretty poor. Touching on some really sort of difficult situations that happen in the world and difficult occurrences, and maybe not really thinking through how these sorts of messages would be interpreted. So this first one talks about, for those impacted by Sandy, stay safe. We'll be doing lots of gap.com shopping online today. How about you? So for those who maybe don't remember, Hurricane Sandy was a hurricane off the east coast of the United States, impacted the United States as well as Cuba and other countries within the Caribbean area. Over 200 people died during that hurricane. So Gap decided they would use this as a way of promoting, hey, because you can't go outside, you need to stay inside, why don't you just get online and do some shopping? Now, they weren't the only company that did this. Quite a few retailers had various sorts of things going where they said, you know, for people who lived on the eastern seaboard of the United States, just to encourage you to stay safe, you know, do some online shopping. And they gave them deals like, if you type in the code word Sandy, you'll get a discount. There was a lot of that sort of stuff going on. So obviously it didn't go down too well. A lot of people were critical of them using such a terrible event to, I guess, almost profit. Now, their response was, you know, our check-in and tweet earlier were only meant to remind you to all stay safe and keep safe and stay indoors. I don't believe that, personally. To me, it sounded like they were really trying to cash in and say, make sure you do some shopping because we want to keep the revenue coming in. So we can interpret that how we want, but you'll see a lot of these cases, people have to do the quick, whoops, sorry, we didn't mean to offend. And it's usually not that we did something wrong, but we're sorry if we did offend, and the apology has to come afterwards. So this was one where they just really didn't think how it would look using such a terrible event to promote themselves. The next one I'm going to show you is related to the fitness industry. These guys weren't deliberately using a terrible event, but just didn't think about the message. So if you remember back in 2013 at the Boston Marathon, there was a bomb that went off, a couple of bombs went off at the finish line, and a number of people were really severely injured. A couple died, quite a lot of severe injuries, and there was a couple of days then of that sort of manhunt of trying to find the people who had done that in the US. So it was a huge, terrible event for them. After the Boston Marathon, a couple of years later, Adidas sent out this message to people who completed the marathon. Congrats, you survived the Boston Marathon. Now, I think we all get where they were coming from, and they possibly just didn't mean to make that connection, just didn't think about it. And I'm sure it's something we've all said to people who have done a marathon. Yeah, you did it, you made it, you survived it, meaning you finished. However, as the person down the bottom has pointed out, might want to think that subject line because of what happened only a couple of years earlier. So with the first one about Sandy and Gap retailer there, I think they did mean to connect it to the event. Second one possibly didn't mean to connect it, but inadvertently did. The next one I'm going to show you about business work objectives is a little bit funnier, and this is where people just haven't thought through what they were posting, and this is where you need to think about when you run a business page for a social media business page for your business. Really think about who's accessing it in terms of, sorry, not who's reading it, but who's posting on it. So which employees have access to post? How well do they know how to use that platform? And how careful are they being in what they post? So the first one is a tweet posted by BlackBerry. Just encouraging you to, keep up your conversations on Twitter by using a BlackBerry. But if you look right down in the bottom, it was sent via iPhone. So whichever staff member at BlackBerry is posting their social media posts, they're not using a BlackBerry to do that. They're using an iPhone, the competitor. So kind of funny, although I'm not sure if that person's boss would have thought it was as funny as we do. Next one I'm going to show you, also quite a funny one actually. So Virgin Atlantic had sent out a tweet encouraging people to, best time to visit London, book today with Virgin Atlantic. Their competitor, British Airways, somehow accidentally shared Virgin Atlantic's post. It was actually quite funny what followed on after that, because obviously Virgin Atlantic saw that it happened. They replied by thanking British Airways for promoting their wonderful brand. British Airways just had to come back and acknowledge the mistake and just have a laugh about it. So again, not one that's really going to have serious implications for you, but also not really particularly ideal. Kind of funny, we can have a laugh about it, but it just shows what can go wrong if you're not really thinking before you hit post or send or share. So in terms of engagement with clients, so remember, this is where we're talking about you're trying to get some sort of interaction. You want people to do something on social media with you. A couple of years ago, Woolworths used this image right around Anzac Day. It was a 100-year anniversary there, so they've got the details on there. What they asked people to do was to share pictures related to the Anzacs, share photos of someone affected by war, and using the imagery that they had on there, talking about fresh in our memories Woolworths. Now, this is, again, one of those ones that just didn't go down too well with people. One thing to start talking about the Anzacs, but when I think a lot of people interpreted this as you're trying to link this too much to your brand, particularly the fresh in our memories being Woolworths, the fresh food people, they're sort of playing on their slogan there. A lot of people thought this was just inappropriate. You've got one of our really big supermarket chains there, cashing in on the images of the Anzac, which is obviously an incredibly emotive story and emotive piece of our history for a lot of people. So to then link it to buying groceries is not really how people want to see and how people want to use Anzac Day. The other interesting one with this campaign is you need to be particularly careful how you do use images and words linked to Anzac Day and the Anzacs, because there are some rules about how that actually can be used. So you can actually be in breach of some advertising rules as well. So you need to also be particularly careful how you actually use certain images and things like that. Next one, engaging with clients, is one I've seen quite a few times. So here, William Hill Australia, I believe, doesn't exist anymore, but it's an online betting account, online betting company. So they've encouraged people to send through their thoughts and run a bit of a competition here. So have you ever dreamed of cheering on a winner in a race named after you? Here's your chance, asking people to suggest a name for a horse race. Now, obviously, a lot of people in this country love horse racing, but also quite a lot don't. What they didn't think through is what potentially could go wrong with this, and that's the key in risk management. Think about what could go wrong before it does. There's going to be people out there who don't like horse racing. What are they potentially going to give us as replies? And this is what they got. Animal abuse, one broken leg and your glue, the dog food dash, glue maker's delight, maiden handicap. So people making fun of the whole competition based on their views about horse racing. I've seen a few of these. Quite surprisingly, the police department in New York did something like this and asked people to share positive images of the police force. Understandably, some people don't have positive views of the police force, and a lot of images shared showed police being quite aggressive towards members of the public. Another company did this with, it was a company and they were trying to promote their four-wheel drive. A car company, sorry, and so promoting one of their large four-wheel drive vehicles. And so a lot of people were making these jokes about these cars are really bad for the environment because they use way too much petrol and they're too big and they're dangerous. And so it's really thinking about not everyone's going to love every brand. Now, what you guys do won't be, I guess, as controversial in most people's eyes, but just really important to think when you start asking for engagement, not everyone's going to be on the same page as you. What sort of things could potentially come back quite publicly that may not have been what you were intending. So moving on to the employee's personal use. Now, this is the area I said I really want you to keep an open mind about potentially what could your employees be doing in their social media. The two I'm going to show you, the first one's fairly poor, second one's terrible. Both of them, the first one's American, second one's Australian. Both of them are nurses. So here you're talking about professional people within the healthcare system, university trained, people you would think should know better. But it's never surprising what they do actually right, I guess. So first one, so sleepy here in ICU. Will someone please code and give me something exciting to do? Obviously, that would be pretty devastating if you had some family members who were quite sick at that hospital and you've seen someone so flippant saying, could someone please maybe get close to dying so you give me something exciting to do? Quite often the problem when people post things on their personal social media page and people often remind them, hey, look, if we go back to your homepage, say, for example, on Facebook, if you go back to someone's homepage, often they have personal details there and they list where they work. Didn't even need to go back to this person's homepage. They've actually just tagged on their post where they actually work. So easily traceable to the nurse, but also the hospital in which she works. Not surprisingly, she did lose her job because of that. And again, these are just images I've got off social media. So for her to go and get other jobs when someone could quite easily Google her name, unfortunately, that sort of stuff pops up. The next one I show you, as I mentioned, is Australian, and it's from an Australian nurse. He was based in Broome. I just want to say, sometimes I'm hesitant to show this one because it's actually really quite appalling. It's quite disgusting. It's quite racist and making threats of violence. I'm sometimes hesitant to show people because it is so horrible, but I do want to show you simply to make people aware of, again, what some people will post. And I'm quite certain this person's employer would have been not just disgusted, but also quite stunned in what they wrote. So there are his two posts. As you can see in the bit I've got circled there, he didn't just write this, he didn't write this on his own Facebook page. He actually wrote it on a community Facebook page within Broome. So that's sharing it really quite broadly. You can see there that the person was stood down. The headline at the top of that image there says, an employment lawyer says breaches like this are fairly common. It was considered to be a racist rant. As you can see in that top heading there. It was considered that he was making reference to a lot of the Indigenous kids who live in that community. And the link they've made with that is in his second tweet when he talks about the joke about bull bars. Not too long before he tweeted these, a teenager in Broome was killed by someone running him down with a vehicle that had a bull bar, and it became apparently a joke to some people, making jokes about running over some of the local Indigenous kids with bull bars. So that's why this was considered to be quite a racist thing of what he wrote, and obviously really quite horrible in lots of the words that he's used. He then came out with his apology, which is quite poor in my personal opinion. Talks about posting while intoxicated. Obviously he thinks they're not a true reflection of him, which I always beg to differ when someone says I only wrote it when I was drunk, but anyway, that's his take on it. Made the clear point that had nothing to do with the health service in where he worked. However, it still is always linked up there because that's who he is, that's what he does, particularly a fairly small community. People are going to be known. This sort of stuff is really quite damaging in terms of not just his own reputation, but the reputation of that health service who is trying to look after everyone in the community. And then you've got people who represent the service you're trying to provide making these sorts of comments. So pretty horrible one, as you can see. Now, one of the things I often get asked is the idea of separating your personal and professional social media use. And so those two that I just showed you, examples of where the person did lose their job because of their personal posts that they made. And people often ask about the legality of doing that. I can't comment from a legal perspective. I'm not a lawyer. I do know that I see a lot of cases where people have lost their job. Some of them fight that and do get their job back, so they're successful in their appeal. Sometimes that is upheld and they don't get their job back. It does seem to really vary. I think it varies so much based on obviously where the person's based. So there's different legislation, different states, different countries, but it can also really come down to what it was actually wrote, how severe was it, how was it interpreted. So there's no real clear cut. But I just want to quickly give you an example of one that did go to court, and this was in Victoria. So this went to VCAT in Victoria, to the Victorian Civil Administrative Tribunal, and you would all have a similar tribunal process within each state. So what we had is within the City Greater Bendigo, people looking to build a mosque, and one particular councillor from there was quite opposed to this. She posted some really quite horrible, derogatory comments and images and posted them to a particular woman who was actually supporting the development of the mosque. She had on her Twitter account a disclaimer stating her opinions were hers alone and not those of the council. So she's trying to separate, I'm not doing this as a council member, this is my personal view, my personal opinion. She also claimed that the only time she acted as a councillor was when she was present at council meetings. So therefore, when she's posting personally at home, I'm not a councillor. However, as I said, this went to VCAT. The judge found her guilty of misconduct under the Local Government Act, and she was reprimanded. I'm not certain of the details of that reprimand, but obviously it still has gone against her. And the judge stated her disclaimer didn't protect her from taking responsibility for her words. So just an interesting one to think about when people do often say, look, I wasn't posting that as a fitness professional. I wasn't posting that as a risk manager. I wasn't posting that as a counsellor. You are who you are at all times. So even when I'm not working, I am still the risk manager for Guild Insurance. And I need to be mindful of that when I'm interacting with people, whether it be in person, whether it be on social media. That is still who I am. So whilst I'm not always working, I still represent my company at all times. You guys do, and the people who work for you do as well. So moving on to the appropriateness of social media. I think one of the challenges we have with social media now is we use it for so much, and we use it for sharing of so much content. Sometimes we don't actually step back and actually think about, is this actually appropriate for me to be sharing this information on social media? We've just had a comment here. In my experience, some staff members have abused each other over Facebook, whilst others have taken selfies whilst on duty in the eye of the customer. It's scary how much some people just don't get it. How important is having a social media policy in place for staff members to adhere to? Thank you for that question, Adrian. I would say incredibly important. One of the difficulties with not having policies in place is it then makes it really challenging to deal with anything that comes up, and if there is some sort of issue of some sort of inappropriate behaviour. The benefit of putting a policy together is it actually makes you stop and think about, if we're going to write this policy, what do we actually want to say? So it actually gives you a chance to sit down and think, well, okay, what's the behaviour and what's the standard we actually want to put in place in terms of social media? So what are the things we need to tell people they can and can't do? And I talked through some of these sort of rules, I guess, and things to have in place and processes to have in place towards the end of my session. But it's a really good point to think about having a policy in place where you can actually talk about what is the behaviour you expect if someone's posting on your business social media page, but also reminding people it's kind of hard to say you can't do things in your own time, but it's making the point to people that to understand what you do in your own time can actually impact your professional reputation and the business reputation as well. So making people aware of the implications, and I think it's having that sort of policy in place is also a really good learning tool. When you induct staff, it's making it really clear, this is what we expect, this is the standard that we adhere to, this is the professional standard we expect, and it's your way of being able to teach them and educate them. And it also gives you something to, I guess, use if someone has breached that. So I would definitely encourage to have some sort of social media policy in place. So coming back to the slides, thinking about when is social media appropriate. Now, the image I'm going to show you, we're not going to discuss politics. Everyone will have different views of this person, but I'm just showing you this because this is someone who probably uses social media for times when maybe he might want to be making a press release or something other like that. So, sorry, moving forward. So Donald Trump. Great one for getting on Twitter and posting anything. So in this particular tweet, he's talking about if Toyota was going to take a plant offshore and move it to Mexico instead of having it within the US, he was going to increase their taxes. He's entitled to make those claims, I guess, as president, and he can talk about taxes, and that's part of what he does in trying to increase jobs for local people within America. Get all that. However, I would suggest that maybe a president talking about taxes with an American company probably doesn't need to be done over Twitter. Same for you guys. If you're maybe wanting to promote some great new fun class that you're running, maybe that can be done on Twitter and a bit of a fun, hey, come along, first session on this day, this will be lots of fun, and a bit of a sort of informal kind of let everyone know what you're doing. However, if you're maybe putting up your memberships, the cost of a membership, maybe not a short little, hey, guess what, kind of post on Twitter, because people probably won't really be thrilled with that information. So that you probably need another platform where you can maybe write something out a little bit longer, reread it. The issue we often have with social media is it doesn't encourage us to draft something, proofread it, get someone else to check it. You can, but the way social media is set up, it's kind of encouraging you to have a thought, type it down, send it, done. Not always a great way of sharing information such as membership prices going up. So that's when you probably need to think about a letter or an email, something like that. So it's just thinking about social media is great, but not for every message. So when should you share on social media? When should you share information other ways? Can you not use social media? Now, I would be guessing that most of you in your businesses are using social media. Sometimes you do come across some businesses that don't want to for various reasons. Sometimes particularly small companies might be a bit reluctant if they're not maybe fully into social media. Sometimes people aren't sure if social media really fits their brand and their image. It's entirely up to you if you use social media. I'm not here to tell you should or shouldn't use it, but you need to think about both the risks of using social media, but also the risks of not using social media. You need to think about if your clients and your competitors are all using social media and you're not, is that a potential risk for you and how you run your business? I'm just going to quickly give you a couple of slides here that talks about some of the stats to give you an idea, and this is what I want you to think about. If you think about should we or should we not be using social media, you need to think about, is this how we should and shouldn't be communicating, and how are other people communicating? So in terms of internet use, now this was from 2018, so about 2 years ago now, 87% of Australians access internet daily. Now that obviously has jumped so much because we all carry smartphones now. It's in your hand. So 88% of those internet users using social networking sites. If you look at the numbers in terms of how many people access, average access of Facebook is 37 times per week. Facebook users have on average 239 friends or followers. So if you just think about all of those numbers of who accesses the internet, who uses the internet for social networking, how often people access social networking every day, if you think about all those numbers, you're talking about a huge number of people. So the messages that get out on social media are enormous. That can be the positive, it can also be the risk, but it's a risk you need to consider if you were thinking about not using social media. In terms of business and social media, this actually kind of does surprise me a little bit. So in terms of Australian businesses with a social media presence, only 51% of small businesses use social media, 58% they're for medium, and when you go up to large businesses, 85%. I think it's slowly growing, but it's again, sometimes people have this, sometimes a hesitation of, is this how I really want to promote? So it's one thing to have a web page, but do I actually want to start using social media? I think one of the risks too, sometimes for small businesses, is they need to think about, how will I actually manage it though? If I do use a social media page, if I have, which one do I have? Do I need Facebook, and do I need Twitter, and do I need Instagram? And where am I going to find the time while I'm running my business to manage all of those? So I can see why it's not easy for small businesses, but I kind of guess that would have been a little bit higher than it is, but that's what the data told me 2 years ago. Moving on to negative posts. I quite often get asked, what do we do if there's a negative post about us? How do we handle it? There's a couple of different ways, but I just want to give you a quick example of, I guess, how to not handle it, and just to give you make you think about the issue. If you don't handle them well, it can cause things to escalate and get a bit complicated. So this woman posted a comment to David Jones on, I think this was on Facebook, where she's not particularly happy with the fact that they used a black model on the front of one of their catalogues. She thinks she can't possibly relate to it, and apparently doesn't know anybody who looks like this woman, and just has a real go at, not thinking about what she said, going for the minority feel good. So some really quite surprising and not particularly nice or inclusive type of words, I guess you could sum up in terms of what she's said there. What was particularly surprising about this though was David Jones' response. So I've said, hi Elizabeth, we're sorry you feel this way. We've passed your feedback onto marketing department for their information and consideration. Now the social media storm that followed this was not having a go at this woman Elizabeth. She's not well known. I think a lot of people, when you read the comments afterwards, a lot of people disagreed with her, but what they took more sort of offence to and really commented on was the reply from David Jones. They were more annoyed with David Jones replying in a way that made it sound like they were validating and in some way agreeing with this woman's concerns and with her issues and what she's actually stated. Now, I don't know if this was one of those kind of automatic replies that companies send out. Potentially this was also maybe a fairly junior person accessing their social media, and sometimes companies do that where they just say, when you just send back a reply saying, thanks for this, we'll come back to you another time. But again, it's made it sound like they're agreeing with it in some way. This could have been a fantastic opportunity for David Jones to make a really strong statement saying, we disagree with your comments. We're all about inclusiveness here at David Jones, and we celebrate different people regardless of what colour they are, what height they are, how they look. we sell clothes for everybody. They could have put a really positive spin on it, but unfortunately it came out the way it did, and they did cop a bit of criticism for it. So in terms of if you get some negative feedback, it's really important to think about what you want to do. And when we talked earlier about a policy, this is something you should be thinking about and having in a policy. So you've already put some thought into what are the sorts of things you would do. So you can ignore and delete the post. You can ignore the post but still leave it visible. You could acknowledge the post and contact the person away from social media. You could reply to the post telling them you disagree with the comment. Just thank them for their feedback. There's a range of things you could do. It really is up to you. My recommendation would be to not completely ignore things. I have seen cases where people have deleted some negative comments and that person's commented again saying, why are you taking down my comments where I wanted to say this? And it kind of gets a little bit messy after that. I think acknowledging is always a good thing, but being very careful how you acknowledge. And obviously David Jones didn't get it quite right in that occasion. Also be really careful not getting into a bit of an argument online. It never goes well. It will start to get messy. It gets out of control. Keeping in mind again how social media works. You do a really quick reply. It's not well thought out, and it just starts to get messy, out of control, and it looks bad. Generally, what I would recommend is say to the person that we will contact you offline. So either send them an email, give them a phone call. Depends on how you can want to contact the person. You may or may not have their details to call them, but take it offline, off public space, so it doesn't turn into this really messy online argument that just makes everyone look a bit silly. So up to you, have a think about it, but just be really careful that it can get quite messy if you don't do it well. So finishing up today, I'm just going to go through a couple of quick tips about what are some of the key things you need to think about when using social media. A lot of these we've already talked about, so we can go through some of these fairly quickly. First off is a really cool one though. Have a plan for how you use social media and why. Don't just do it. It's 2020. Everyone thinks we're starting up a business, we need social media. But well, do you? Maybe you do, but what are you actually going to do with it? Have a plan for what you'll be sharing. What content is ideal for social media? What is the purpose behind it? It's the same as having a business plan for creating your business. Have a business plan for how you use social media. Make sure your business social media discussions and plans are based on business requirements, not your personal view. So if you personally love Facebook, but Facebook's not going to be great for your business, don't do it. If you hate social media, personally, that's fine. Some people do. But if social media is going to be great for your business, you probably still need to do it for your business, not just avoid it because you personally don't really like it. So think about what's best for the business, not what would you like to do, but what's best for the business. Training for social media use within a business is really good. There's quite a bit out there. Just do some searches, you'll find lots of different things out there. One of the problems I think a lot of companies make is, look, they kind of have this idea, not really into social media, I don't really know how it works, but we've got some really young stuff. They use social media all the time. They've grown up using it. Great, we'll get them to manage our account. Not always a great way to think about it, because whilst young people might have more of an idea about how to use the different platforms and all the different things you can do on it, do they understand business risk? And that's what you need to balance. So they might have some great ideas, but it may not be great in terms of the sorts of content they're posting, how to handle negative comments. It's not something you just get the young people to do because they know how to do it. You need to think about who is one of our best communicators, who really knows how to share the message we want to share to represent who we are, who our business is. Understand the platform you're using. There are so many out there. They change regularly. You need to know what you're using or it becomes quite dangerous for you. Make sure there are guidelines on who within the business can post on social media. There's a couple of hundred people that work for Guild Insurance, and I think there's about 3 or 4 people who can post on our social media pages. They're within our marketing and communications team, and it's really quite strict, and nothing goes out without it being seen by the head of that department. So we're really strict about the messages that go out because of the impact it has on our business, and because what we're sharing is all about sharing the brand, what we want people to know and understand about Guild Insurance. If we left it for others to share, it potentially is going to lose the brand, it's going to lose the image, and it's going to lose the message, and it can get a bit messy and complicated. Have a process also for how often you manage your social media pages. What you don't want is for people to say, right, we need social media, we'll set up the account, but we forget to access it very often. If someone goes on there and posts a negative comment or gives you some feedback, asks a question, and no one responds to them, they're going to get pretty frustrated and annoyed. So you need to make sure you've got a process for who's managing it, not just who's posting, but who's checking and who's responding. We talked about this in terms of the Donald Trump example I gave you. Consider what messages to share on social media and what need to be kept off social media. Be really careful, and this is a really big one, I think, for the fitness industry. Be really careful of obtaining professional information from social media. There's so many fitness bloggers out there and influencers and lots of different sort of private groups where people share information. They can be great, but what you really need to be careful about is that you're not obtaining information that's actually incorrect and inappropriate. So if you are using social media, make sure you're following people who are experts at what they do. You know what their qualifications are, you know they know their stuff, and they have a position to be providing advice. Or else you could be getting all sorts of incorrect information and things that aren't really going to help you. So social media is fantastic in that there is so much out there, but a bit like any part of the internet and using, same as using web pages, there is so much incorrect information out there as well that you just need to be really careful and make sure that you've got some sort of filter in place where you're only looking at appropriate information, where you're looking at professional guidance. Before posting, think about how your messages are going to be interpreted or misinterpreted. It's really easy in social media, as we've already said, to just kind of go blur. You've got an idea and it's out there to the world really quickly. Think about how you've actually written it. Again, keep in mind, quite often social media encourages a very short message, so you haven't been able to really elaborate and expand on what it is you're trying to say. So really keep in mind, how could someone else, maybe outside our industry or outside our business, just one of our clients, how could they possibly misinterpret this? Get someone else to read it, get some other views on it, but just really stop and think through the message. It's so easy to misinterpret when we're using social media. We've already talked about separating personal and professional social media. Can't be done. Last couple. Now, being friends on social media with your clients is potentially quite risky. If you have a business page, obviously encourage your clients to access that and engage with them on that. But for anyone who maybe, say if you're working as some sort of fitness professional, maybe working on an individual space, you might be a PT, some sort of fitness instructor, whatever it is you're doing, if you have your individual clients, make sure again they're going to a business page and not to your own personal page. What that starts to do is it blurs the boundaries between you as the professional and them as the client. Or she might talk a bit about, what you're doing on the weekend. They might know a little bit about your family. They don't need to see all the posts from your holidays, from your dinners out, from your parties with friends. You need to keep some level of professional separation. That's professional boundary. So you're still the professional, they're still the client, little bits about each other, but you don't know everything. So there's no real law against it. It's not a rule, but my strong recommendation would be to not become friends on social media on a personal page with your clients. That's what your business page is for. There is no such thing as privacy on social media. I've seen too many cases where people have, they call them private groups, and in there they've been having some conversations, maybe criticizing someone from their workplace or criticizing someone else within the industry. Don't need to know a lot about technology to know how to take a screenshot and share that. And that's exactly what has happened to so many people. Just because you've got a private group does not mean it's private. Not hard to get into private groups, not hard to screenshot and share information from that group. So please don't ever think anything on social media is private. Privacy rules in terms of sharing client information and things like that applies equally to social media as it does to any other part of our world and what we do in our businesses. Never post in haste. Please remember, carefully consider what you're posting. Just because it's on social media, put as much thought into that tweet as you do into a lengthy email or letter. Last thing, a lot of us, I think, those of us who've been using social media for quite a while and maybe didn't grow up with it but started using it, say, in our 20s or our 30s, we're often told, if you're going to put anything on social media, make sure you don't write it. If you don't want your grandma to know it, don't write it on social media. For you in a professional setting, I would say, if you don't want your client, your colleague, your competitor, your insurer, whoever it might be, if you don't want someone knowing about what it is you're saying, don't put it on social media because it can and will be found. Just quick last thing I'd like to finish off with. It's a bit of quite a funny story. This is an article I encourage you to look up just to have a bit of a laugh. So this was written by an academic, an educator back in 1995, where he really didn't think the internet was going to take off. When I first read this article, I actually thought it was written now almost as a joke on what someone might have said back then. He makes a couple of valid points about how, but if you're using the internet, you're lacking that one-on-one personal interaction with people, which you kind of do. But then he also made a few comments about really mocking as if it's going to take off. And he really didn't think, he makes a few comments about, come on, as if people are going to be booking holidays or booking restaurants or reading books online. That's just not going to happen. So it's interesting when you think that was, I say only 1995. 1995 might be a long time ago for some people. But it's interesting to think just how quickly social media and the use of the internet has come along in a fairly short space of time. So if anyone does remember 1995, remembers working then, it's almost hard to believe that we were working and studying without accessing the internet, whereas now we can barely go half an hour without accessing it. So it's just a funny article to read and have a think about how much things have actually changed. That is all for me. As I said, there are my contact details. There's phone number and website for Guild Insurance. There's my email address at Guild Insurance. riskhq.com.au is a risk management website being run and managed by Guild Insurance. On there it's free to access, so even if you're not with Guild Insurance, you can access it. It's got a range of different sorts of risk information for the various professionals that we work with. There's a range of different sorts of risk management articles talking about a whole lot of different sort of risk areas. So feel free to go on there and have a look at any articles and bits and pieces that you find there.
Thank you so much, Christie. It's been a really, really interesting little snapshot into various, very prominent, well-known organizations and their use of social media.
Yeah.
There's some good slides in there of shock value, and I'm glad you touched on Trump. I was going to ask about Trump if you didn't, and I really, really want to press you. It wouldn't be a social media conversation or about values and the era of corporate responsibility if I didn't ask you about Colin Kaepernick and that Nike campaign. And I guess I'll just sort of read out some of the stats here. So if anyone's been living under a rock for the last couple of years and didn't know about this, essentially Colin Kaepernick, NFL football player, was taking the knee during the national anthem in NFL football games, basically in sort of to raise awareness and or to protest the sort of plight of African Americans in across a whole range of equality measures in the United States. Trump called him an SOB on Twitter, and he was fired from his job. I think he played for did he play for the Patriots, or I can't remember his team, but he was fired. He was a quarterback. He lost his contract. He was one of the highest paid NFLers at the time. I don't think I know there was some interest in looking at him by a couple of other teams. I don't think he's back up and running, but feel free to correct me. But Nike did a Twitter post, and it was believe in something, even if it means sacrificing everything. And it was a picture of Colin Kaepernick. And there was a whole social media storm, Fox News. There was a whole movement, a groundswell of people burning their Nikes and things like that. And it's interesting. I don't know if anyone's watched the Michael Jordan show on Netflix right now, The Last Dance, or the Chicago Bulls story. But famously, Michael Jordan failed to endorse a black senator candidate when they were running against sort of a racist candidate in his home, sort of in North Carolina. And his response was Republicans buy Nikes as well. And anyway, so Nike themselves, 20 or sort of 15 years on, sort of have gone and done a campaign themselves. The end result was they earned $163 million in earned media. They had a $6 billion brand value increase and a 31% boost in sales. That was the net result of that very controversial social media post. I'd love to pick your brain on that. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I found that a really fascinating one, and I was And it's interesting. So there was so much talk about it, and there was even people saying, like, Nike knew they had so much market value already and such a huge profile with so many star athletes around the world under their brand. So I remember some people even saying, yeah, do they really believe that, or are they doing it as just a promotion thing? Who knows? I would like to think they did actually believe in what they were doing. And I think they were really smart too, because they would have known, an incredibly smart marketing, from a marketing perspective, an incredibly smart brand, have done so well. And I have been watching the whole Michael Jordan series, and it's quite fascinating to know. I didn't realize that before Jordan, they were actually a fairly small company. So it's quite fascinating to think how big they've become in, 25 years or whatever it is, or 35 years. But it was quite interesting I'm sure that Nike were actually thinking, we know we're going to take a hit here, but we also think it's going to work in our favor in the same time. And they got it right. And they did do so well out of it. And it's really interesting, though, to see how some really large companies can be really bold on social media and be prepared to take a hit. And I think that happened quite a bit too in Australia during the same-sex marriage vote and during the campaign leading up to that. And so much smaller companies compared to Nike, but a lot of Australian companies really came out and made a bold statement that we support this. They would have known that they will have some people say, I disagree with you, don't want you making this public stance, I don't agree with same-sex marriage, whatever the feedback. They knew they were going to take a hit, but they chose also, we think it'll also help us, and this is a stance we want to make. And it's quite a bold thing for a company to comment in what's a bit outside their sphere, but to use social media to say, we're going to use this to promote what we think is right. We know some of you won't agree, but this is who we are and who we stand for. So I did love what Nike did with that. I thought it was really bold. I loved too how they did it, because they did it in a kind of a subtle way, clearly making the point. It wasn't a really subtle point, but didn't make a big rant about it, just the beautiful image of him and just that stand up for what you believe in. I thought it was pretty cool. But it's also easy for Nike, who would have a massive team of communication experts and a massive team of people who would really think through, what are the implications? Should we do it? Should we not? I'm sure there was a lot of discussion about it before they did it.
You can almost imagine that they're looking at, where they're selling lots of Nikes, and was it predominantly the sort of democratic states and things like that, and really interesting, and I thought really interesting the contrast too between Michael Jordan, in the 90s, and then these guys now, in sort of the late, when was that, late 2018, I think that campaign went out. So it's just that change as well, and and how maybe it is as a result of social media, but so I guess the summary of that is it was a very big risk, but it sounds like you were saying it was a calculated risk as well.
Is my assumption, but I'm pretty sure Nike wouldn't do much that's not very calculated, just with the success they've got. But yeah.
So guys, feel free to drop. There's some really positive comments coming through, Christie, there in the chat bar. But guys, feel free. We've got about 5 minutes. Feel free to drop in a question for Christie. Tom has put in a comment. Read Shoe Dog if you're interested in Nike as a business from startup. Yeah, be great to hear from you guys out there if you've got any additional questions. We'll just sort of wait on that there. But so in terms of do you think, Christie, that when we looked at some of those social media posts, like the Virgin British Airways one was really interesting.
Yeah.
What do you think there would have been like a net economic effect? I mean, obviously we have that data for the Nike one, but do we know of examples where there's been sort of net negative or net negative economic outcomes for companies based on social media?
Thinking off the top of my head, I'm not sure of others other than that Nike one I was aware of. I have to do some more thinking about that, but that's interesting. And it's interesting to, I guess, the Nike one was so huge that you really could link the increase in their sales and their net worth to that, because it was so significant. sometimes it might be hard to tell if there's other things going on as to how much it really does hit them. I think the challenge too for some companies, and particularly what smaller companies need to think about, is, Nike obviously has a lot of competitors, but I also think it will always be big. And I think, if I go back to my example of using the same-sex marriage vote, and that a lot of companies came out and were really quite forward in their support of this. And it was interesting when a lot of people were saying, well, I'm not going to use your company anymore. And people sort of point out to them, it's like, well, Qantas and Virgin Australia have both supported it. So, and the other smaller airlines are kind of linked to them. So you kind of don't have anyone else to fly with. So sometimes too, I think companies can make a stance knowing, you know what, people aren't going to leave us because we've kind of got the market here. So they almost can be bolder, I think. But I think it's harder sometimes for small businesses that are more grappling with their image and trying to get that client base. And it's not always as easy to be quite bold, particularly too with small companies where you might link that company with a particular person or couple of people because you know them well, which will often happen at leisure centres. Whereas Nike is such a global brand, they're a little bit faceless other than the athletes who represent them. So they can make those bold statements and you're not going to necessarily link it to that individual. So it's quite different, I think, how different companies can, I guess, risk that sort of image that they put out there. But yeah, in terms of that real economic hit, I don't know off the top of my head other ones where it's been so bold and so obvious as the Nike one.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. That's it's an interesting one.
It is.
Sure. And yeah, we had earlier in the series we had Simon Weatherall, who was the CEO for the State Sports Centre Trust. He set up Melbourne Sports and Aquatic Centre and the State Netball Centre about 20 years ago, essentially, or 25 years ago, or something along those lines. And he was talking about, there's this, in this era of COVID-19 and shifting your, fitness classes and things like that into an online space. Is there an opportunity to sort of celebritize your local PT, your local Jimmy, your local leisure center, and in order to sort of compete with, some of these bigger personalities and organizations and things like that. So, and it's probably quite a timely presentation in the sense that, there's some risks involved with that, and you do need to be a bit calculated in what you do and not just sort of wing it, which seems to be a bit of a resounding message here.
Yeah. And social media is a great place to do that. If you do want people to know more about the professionals you have working for you, social media is a fantastic way to do that. But that's where you also need to be really careful, because if someone then does look that person up and their social media page isn't too great from a professional standing maybe, and then it's not going to always be great for them as well. So there's a lot of risk. And I think this comes back to the whole The Last Dance and the Michael Jordan show, that he was a fantastic brand ambassador because he was so protective of his brand, but he was also in a time when there wasn't social media. So whether you're talking about promoting, say, an AFL player at the moment, or whether you're promoting a local PT, what they do in their own time and on social media can then really damage the message you're trying to send about this brand awareness and using these people as an ambassador. And Michael Jordan is a classic example of someone who, early on when that wasn't happening as much, he knew how to protect his brand and he did it so well. That's the thing you've got to be careful about when you're using some sort of ambassador and trying to, celebritize someone who's not already a celebrity. You got to pick the right people, because that can really turn quite poorly. And we've seen that happen with the AFL and particularly the NRL, where they've had their poster boy for the season and then he's gone and done something that he probably shouldn't have done and shared it on social media. And, that whole campaign has really fallen apart, unfortunately. So it's it can have really high value, but it can have such high risk as well. And it's such a risky thing to do if you don't do it really well and don't pick that right person. Yeah,
thank you. So that's a really interesting, that's a whole other concept. There are firms out there that vet people. There are firms that collect your data. You can pay firms to to analyze someone's social media footprint, and they can pretty much tell you their political leanings and their everything based on that. So I'm sure if there's anyone out there considering going down the celebritizing road, you can have a look into that. Christie, we're just past 12 o'clock. I just wanted to say thank you so much for making yourself available to talk to the fitness industry and the aquatic and leisure and recreation industry. It's been fantastic to have sort of an open conversation here after your very illuminating presentation as well. So thank you very much for your time. And just all the listeners, on behalf of Fitness Australia and Lifesaving Victoria, thanks for listening in, and the recording will be available on our webpage.
Thanks all.
Thank you. So I'll just hang up this conversation in about a minute. And we've just got Fitness Australia should consider adding this as an iLearn module, and then just some more sort of thanks.
I'll have a chat to them.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks so much, Christie. Cheers.
No worries. Thank you.
Bye-bye.